The V8, a power plant, a pop culture icon, an American institution, the perfect blend of speed, power, noise, vibration, heart, and soul. Cast in fire and iron more than a century ago, now digitally designed and precision milled, the V8's meteoric rise and subsequent fall from grace has been well documented. But as we push forward into a future of alternative fuels, the V8 remains unbroken and unrelenting. A golden age. Not just surviving, but thriving.
I love V8 engines.
But it's like a Frankenstein, and when it comes to life, it's just magic.
A V8 is kind of an irreverent, you can use the hand gesture of your imagination to say, I am just gonna buy whatever I want. And it's very American.
I mean, it represents the power of the people, right?
People have been conditioned to love the V8.
When you think of V8, you automatically think of American.
It's that feeling of torque that you just get so addicted to.
The performance, the sound, that overall visceral experience that you get.
Inline 6-cylinders are kind of fun and cool and cute, and 4-cylinders are cute, but V8s are what you are when you grow up.
The V8 doesn't just move machines, it moves people, driving the heart of automotive history forward, mile after mile. This is the story of that engine and those people.
Do your best impression of a V8 sound.
I don't want to hurt myself. I have a lot of interviews today, so I need to really take care of my throat here.
Oh, I don't really make a V8 sound effect. I don't eat beans that often, so there's not any reason to really.
Not that high pitched.
I love the startup when you get that cold start and it kind of over revs and then settles in, right? So it would be kind of like a. And then it's, it's like.
Or the old quadrijet.
But then you're waiting for that next moment where the shift happens. When that shift happens, it like gives you that pause, and then there's more.
And that's, 9,000 RPM, right?
So, what does your favorite V8 engine sound like? Give us your best impression.
Okay.
That's what it sounds like.
I think the reason the V8 is so prevalent is because of its versatility. It's the only engine type that really hits your senses as hard as it does.
It's almost physiological when you drive a V8.
And I remember talking to an engineer that said that the way the human body works and the way you hear sound and frequencies, there's something about the human psyche that's just really comforting, and I just love it.
It's a visceral experience. So from the time you turn the key, you hear the sound, you feel it resonate through your body. You put young kids in a V8, and they might not know anything about a car, but you'll see that smile come across your face. That was me, and it's why it's been such an important part of my life. I mean, they're special.
I would say the best moments of my life have been around V8 engines. It's bizarre to be emotional about this, but it actually makes me emotional because I don't think of the engine, I think of the people. Whether it's hanging out with friends, watching people succeed at a racetrack. I know you guys through all this stuff. Like my friends, I know them and have relationships with them because of V8 engines, I guess I'd say. So that's my bizarrely emotional answer to that question. To American car culture, I think the V8 means everything, from drive-ins to camping, to towing, to speed, to motorsports, to everything.
It's like up there with apple pie and hot dogs and baseball. I mean, it's part of Americana.
I drove across the country before I had my license in a V8 notchback 65 Mustang. So that meant independence for me, becoming a man. I drove across the country without my parents' permission, knowing about it. From California to Michigan, I hand-built that V8. In fact, I lived in the back of the car for a while because I couldn't afford rent. I had to choose between redoing the motor and living in an apartment. So it meant my independence as a person.
The V8 is so associated with American power and American, prestige and all that kind of thing. We didn't invent the V8, but it's a bit like Kleenex. It's not a type of tissue, it's a brand name. But since so many people use it, you just call it a Kleenex. And when you think of V8, you automatically think of American. We think everything's uniquely American. People think Henry Ford invented the V8. I mean, he didn't. He made it popular. I mean, America is great at bringing things down and manufacturing to a level where everybody can afford it.
The first V8 engine came from a French aircraft design in 1904, an engine that soon garnered interest in Detroit, a burgeoning manufacturing center. Chevrolet would offer its first V8 in 1917, well before its more famous small block. But by 1914, it would be Cadillac that offered the first mass-produced V8 for America, with its 5.1-liter L-head V8. The cars weren't all that economically viable for everyone, and yet it pointed the way forward.
Here's the Cadillac V8. Well, the engine was developed in 14, this is in 18. But this is all stock, and it just runs great. This has, here's my favorite feature. This is what they call a fat man wheel. There you go like that.
Oh, no way.
So if you're a fat guy. Yeah.
That is
For men of girth. If you were eating in 1918, you're doing better than most people, you know?
Some of the molten iron goes to the foundry, where one of the most remarkable operations is the casting of the V8 engine block. A special technique has made it possible to build a mold with 46 cores and to cast the entire V8 engine block, including the clutch housing, in a single piece. This achievement has made the smooth power and flexibility of the V8 engine available to millions of people.
While the Cadillacs of the day were lavishly crafted, over-engineered, and eye-wateringly expensive, one man had a vision, motoring for the masses. And without him, this story could have turned out much different.
We came out with a flathead in '32. That was the most important part of the V8 history because it democratized. And when Bonnie and Clyde broke all those laws.
Bonnie and Clyde, right? What did Bonnie and Clyde drive? What did Clyde Barrow
write to
Henry Ford? A letter telling him, I only steal your cars because of this engine.
Yeah. Henry was able to make a cost-effective, easily reproduced V8 engine that was super reliable and had all kinds of potential for hot rodding and racing.
If this, exploration of V8 history doesn't include some love ode to the flathead, what are we doing here?
Kind of started it.
It wasn't the first, and it certainly wasn't the best, but it was mass production-wise, putting that horsepower into people's hands, it changed the whole game.
The flathead Ford V8 is the reason all V8s are popular from that day until now.
Interesting.
Because that created the American hot rodder mentality that to get more power, I had to have 8 cylinders. And I swear that's the moment that hot rodding began.
Henry Ford may have brought the V8 to the masses, but it wasn't until after the Second World War that the idea of taking them apart and optimizing them came into the mainstream. It all began with a band of guys from Southern California. One of them is Ed Iskandarian.
Well, of course, it was at first we were fascinated by the flathead Ford V8 in 1932, and it gradually got improved a little bit in later years. We looked at what the other guys had built. We'd get ideas to build a certain kind of car of our own.
The right guy at the right time can make all the difference. The Ford Flathead V8 came along as Ed Iskandarian reached adulthood. After returning from the Second World War, Iski got to work, soaking up knowledge, building engines, and racing flathead V8s.
We had the Buraq Dry Lake nearby, 100 miles from Los Angeles, out in the desert. That was our place to try out the cars.
His biggest contribution? Becoming the father, the cam father, of the aftermarket camshaft. It was the holy grail of V8 power. This coincided with the advent of more powerful and more efficient overhead valve V8s, engines Iski was all too happy to tinker with. That act would spawn an industry in the form of the trade body known as SEMA, and Iskandarian would be its first president.
We went from, we just want horsepower and we're a small niche group of hot rodders, into, wow, the big three are marketing performance and horsepower to me, and that's all V8s. Pop culture too. In the 60s, the Beach Boys were singing about the stuff, right?
Sure.
It was a mainstream.
Absolutely.
Movies were Drag Strip Girl, you know, Two-Lane Blacktop.
Paul
all
Revere and
this
the Raiders
stuff.
had a song called SS396. It was a song about an engine.
Right.
The Porcupine V8. I mean, they were singing about...
She's Real Fine, my
409. I mean, just, and again, we sound like we are decrepit and are about to be buried with an excavator because we're talking about these old songs about engines. But the reality is, it was the popular culture.
Through the 50s and 60s, American V8s ruled the road.
And here is Chevrolet's Ramjet fuel injection, a dynamic engineering advance made possible to...
Whether it was drag racing for pink slips, competing for speed records on the salt flats, rubbing rims on the dirt tracks and ovals of the American racing scene, and even in the movies. Nevertheless, as the culture shift of the 70s gained traction, the V8 began to fall from favor. Seen as uneconomical, old-fashioned, and expensive, with the world in the midst of a recession and a global oil crisis, manufacturers began turning to smaller, more economical engines. The V8, it would seem, was doomed. Its endearing character, however, would power the passion of engineers who would work diligently over the decades to vault the V8 to levels of efficiency only previously dreamed of.
I'm old enough to remember when emissions requirements came in and completely neutered V8s to where they were producing 100 and some horsepower. The smog requirements, technically, we were incapable of dealing with.
Compression ratios went down and the power levels plummeted and the engines were, pretty boring and didn't make a lot of power. And then all of a sudden it just surged back up in the 90s.
We've been incredibly fortunate to have been able to ride this regulatory and emissions rollout while still improving the durability, improving the fuel economy, improving emissions, all while giving customers what they really want, which is more performance.
I think these things ebb and flow. Do I think the V8 is done? Absolutely not. What's amazing about that propulsion system is that when you look at over the arc of time, every step has made it better. I often get asked the question, what's my favorite? Well, it's the next one.
The world began to recover and emerge from the economic hardship of the 1970s and into the heady days of the 1980s. The economy bounced back and grew to new highs. People were earning better than ever and wanted to show it. An old friend, the V8, once shunned by the masses, suddenly found favor. Since then, it has been on a meteoric rise, which brings us to today.
We live in a golden age. Honestly, right now, it's remarkable. Technology and the engineering team that works on that deserves the credit for accomplishing what, from a distance, looks practically impossible.
The current V8s have more specific output and power density than anything that was available in the muscle car area. It is the heyday.
I think the future is even brighter with things like electrification. As you hybridize V8s and you bring electric turbocharging to reduce turbo lag to V8s, you can make untold amounts of power while keeping the V8 reliable and clean.
The Hemi, the loss of the Hellcat, that is a giant blow. That said, I wouldn't count Dodge out.
Yes.
The new Charger EV, you can remove the batteries and a V8 with a rear-wheel drive transmission bolts into the frame.
By design.
And now it's time to talk about the elephant in the room, the Hemi. Known to devotees as simply the elephant. The early Chrysler Hemis would quickly gain status. One in particular, the Firepower Hemi, would be the first to achieve 1 horsepower per cubic inch. But it would all end in 1958. As the years passed, other V8s joined the fray, but racers doggedly stayed with the Hemi. There seemed to be no limit to how much punishment they could take. And then it happened. the second coming of the Hemi in 1964. The elephant was back, and it was bigger and angrier. By 1966, the street Hemi put out 425 horsepower. It was the regular Joe's moonshot. But like Apollo, the Hemi's days were numbered. By the end of 1971, the show was over. Or was it? 3 decades later, the ground would rumble once again. The Hemi was back. Power would swell to staggering levels, culminating in the supercharged Hellcat Hemi. Its most potent version, the Demon 170, puts out 1,025 horsepower. It does this on E85 fuel, made mostly from corn. That was in 2023. The Hemi's effect on the V8 landscape, both in terms of production cars and in the aftermarket, cannot be overstated. Always a step ahead of the competition, the third-generation Hemi consistently punched well over its weight. An engine that today still powers select truck models. Massively powerful, riotously entertaining, and striking fear with its telltale blower whine, the eminently affordable Dodge Hellcat seemed to say, "Light 'em up and let it eat." While Ford and Chevrolet continue the good fight, we wonder, could the Hemi return? After all, it disappeared twice before, only to return with a vengeance.
Ford is about to launch the Mustang GTD, which has sort of their ultimate expression of the V8. It takes their V8 to a whole other level in terms of what's available for the street. They're taking racing technology, putting it in a Mustang that's a Mustang almost only in name. It's a race car, really.
And it's not just designed for straight line performance, it's designed to be the ultimate handling Mustang with incredible racetrack capability.
It's a car that I have had in my head for a couple decades. We wanted to have a vehicle that we could actually bring technology that's not legal in racing to the street.
You know, like that new Mustang GTD with that rear window where you watch the suspension work. When you're driving, hey, look at that, bang! You know, you're watching the rear suspension in your rear view mirror. Hilarious. But you know, I ordered one of those.
It's this incredible American icon, the Ford Mustang, transformed into a wild race vehicle.
The next amazing car that I can think of on the horizon is the Corvette ZR1.
The traditional American V8, it probably revs to maybe 6,500 RPM. It's a very deep sounding engine with a ton of torque. With the Corvette Z06 and the new ZR1, they're leaning into flat plane crankshafts and the high RPM experience that delivers.
First of all, the ZR1's engine is the most powerful V8 ever put in a production sports car for the volume manufacturers. 1,064 horsepower, 5.5 liter, 8,000 RPM redline, twin turbo, just a technical marvel.
People are going to be shocked when they think it's going to be this fire-breathing monster, but it's a well-rounded Corvette. It's just taken to the nth degree, just crazy, over-the-top, overwhelming performance capability.
Ford's 7.3-liter Godzilla is another great engine. It's one that's extremely versatile. It's one that's used in commercial applications, truck applications, in the Super Duty truck. A lot of torque, a lot of power. But the exciting thing is Ford is offering it as a crate engine. And now people are taking that and putting it in classic Mustangs or Fox body Mustangs, Cobra kit cars, or anything else under the sun. Taking a 7.3-liter V8 and putting in something else is sort of one of our God-given rights.
The V8 is such an institution, for American automakers especially. They've got to have a V8 in the lineup as long as they're making combustion engines.
With new high-performance V8 offerings like GTD and ZR1, the future of the V8 seems secure. But what comes next? What's being done to ensure that the V8 lives on forever? Every aspect of the IC engine is under scrutiny. In a V8, friction, waste heat, and entropy consume as much as 80% of the energy stored in gasoline. In light of advancements in electric vehicles, this is a number which must be improved upon. And when it comes to the efficiency of V8 engines, we've only just begun to scratch the surface.
When we think about a V8 engine or an engine in period, the last couple of years have been a rough year for the internal combustion engine. And I think largely because there's a misconception that these products are low tech. As a matter of fact, there's a significant amount of technology that goes into giving you a 400 horsepower V8 engine that'll last 200,000 plus miles. We do a lot of really, really cutting edge stuff in this building. The tolerancing that we're building these engines to allow for the longevity and the quality of the product are more akin to aircraft tolerances than engine tolerances of the past.
Just behind me is one of our last aeroproofing stations that's fundamental to our process here at Windsor Engine Plant. The sound that you can hear is actually, the start to the heartbeat of our engine. So essentially what we're doing is we're replicating the combustion and the thermocycling of an engine in a vehicle. However, we're not using any fuel. At this point, we're up to about 200 parameters that we monitor, and they all contribute to data being, recorded, and we're able to use that data again to predict and understand current quality, as well as whether or not there is a shift in our data suggesting that we should be optimizing our process elsewhere.
We make about 1,000 engines a day here in this plant. We also make about 1,000 engines at Essex Engine Plant. So between the two, the city produces about 2,000 V8s for Ford every single day.
Yeah, I'd say that the V8 market is still really strong. Our manufacturers are still developing those products. But we are seeing, obviously, government intervention. I mean, we are seeing in the V8 world, hydrogen starting to come into play. There's synthetic fuels, there's biofuels, there's all these different technologies that continue to be innovated. That's what America was built on, innovation. And we should allow Americans, number one, to continue to innovate and look for new ways to make sure that from an environmental standpoint, we're clean, but innovation should prosper.
I'm Norris Marshall. This is Blueprint Engines, and we're a performance crate engine manufacturer.
We're still seeing products developed for V8 engines that have been around for 20 and 30 years. I mean, I can go to a Blueprint Engines and they're building every part brand new now. It used to be the thought that you can't make horsepower anymore and still be emissions legal. Well, we've disproved that. Again, innovation takes hold. Our manufacturers see the challenge. They see the challenge that CARB and EPA had put in front of them, and they meet and exceed that challenge. To see guys like Blueprint Engines who are going through that process and who are able to make horsepower emissions legal is really cool to see.
I think it must be really challenging for the OEM manufacturers to figure out what they can make and sell. So currently there's some regulations that would cause OEMs, in order to meet them, they can't really make a lot of V8s, they gotta make a lot of EVs.
We're looking at an immediate future where there's no V8 in the Dodge lineup. And this is a brand that built its entire identity on loud, powerful, crazy V8 engines. And the fact that they don't have a lineup of four-cylinder vehicles and hybrids and EVs is causing them to get rid of this iconic V8 engine.
We think the marketplace wants that Hemi engine. So we have worked with some people at Stellantis to establish a supply chain of components so that we can assemble that engine and sell it into the aftermarket.
I also think there's a decent chance that they'll come back. The pendulum will swing the other way, and they will have a V8 in the lineup again.
As we've all seen, every single global OEM over the last, as we sit here in 2024, the last 12 months, every single one of them has gone, well, I know we said we're going to be EV by 2030, but maybe it's going to be.
What he meant was.
Right.
And the other man behind the curtain is our new V8 engine plant.
Yeah. Ta-da. So, and it's got an alternator on it, so it's kind of a EV. It generates electricity, but no, as bleak as things can look in a headline at times, it really isn't as bad as you think it is.
Sky isn't falling, man.
It isn't.
The push-pull of regulation and reality will rumble on, while Fortune 500s and grease-knuckled entrepreneurs alike continue to work on their version of the future V8. One such maverick is Mike Copeland.
Okay, so the basic engine is the same as a 2014 CTS-V. So it's a LSA cylinder heads. We use the LS3 block.
By taming that most abundant of substances, hydrogen, could he be the one who saves the future of the V8?
It's so funny, when we built this, and started taking it places and showing it off. Nobody believed it was real. Nobody believed that it was really on hydrogen. We raced it at Optima. We had more than 100 people crawl underneath the truck looking at, does it have a gas tank somewhere? There's no way they're really running on that tank of hydrogen in the bed. But it is. The number one question people ask all the time is, how does it sound? What does it sound like? When you drive it, does it sound like a gasoline car or does it not? In our case, if I didn't tell you it was hydrogen, you just got in it and you didn't see the tank, you wouldn't know that it runs on hydrogen. So it's amazing how much it is just like a gasoline vehicle. The performance is really close to the same. The sound is the same. The acceleration is good, it's the same basically. The best part is, that supercharger whine.
So I think we're going to see a little resurgence of V8s. I know Ford and GM are very committed to V8s yet. They keep improving the technology and making the engines more efficient and cleaner. So there's just like an unlimited amount of that that's possible. And then if you start talking about changing the fuel, it's a whole new ball game. You can change to renewables, you can change to hydrogen. All those things are being worked on. So I think the death of the V8 is maybe a little overstated.
There's a lot of technology still that we can apply that we haven't done yet. There's opportunities with materials. Basically, we are far, far from done not only producing V8s, but producing better, more powerful, more efficient V8s in the future.
I mean, you spend 150 years perfecting one technology. It seems silly to throw it all away and replace it with something else when you can modify. Because nobody doesn't like the engine, you just don't like the fuel that it uses.
Does the V8 have an expiration date? Everything does. I don't think in our lifetime. I think I'm going to see it all the way, even if it's just in my garage, until the end.
You're asking me if a V8 has an expiration date. I'm here at the end of my career. I don't know what's going to happen. It's almost like saying, you know, does the advent of the automobile mean there'll never be horses again? You know, yes, it changes the environment. Things may look different in the future. I think there'll always be a market for V8s.
And look, Jim Farley from Ford recently was like, we will build V8 engines until, you know, until like Charlton Heston holding the rifle and take it out of my cold dead hands. You know, Farley talked about that. He's an enthusiast racer.
Yep. We're going to make a V8 as long as we can, because that's what Mr. Ford will want us to do.
I fully expect that my 14-year-old son, who is looking at some of these old cars now, is going to be able to buy a car in 30, 40 years, and it's going to have a V8. You see the manufacturers that, you know, have taken the V8 to this pinnacle. You know, they keep pushing, and I have a belief that the V8, because of its configuration, because it works so well, we're going to see it go on to be an alternative to all these other engines, and probably the go-to engine for years to come.
The technical challenges are known. The engineering is ongoing. Strategies like variable valve timing, displacement on demand, and direct injection are squeezing more power from a gallon of gas, and alternative fuels like ethanol, natural gas, and hydrogen are clean and renewable. And yet, gasoline will provide an all-important bridge to a future with more choices. The V8 built America, but can our love affair with it survive? Can EVs replace the visceral experience of a living, breathing V8? The answer lies with the new generation. One thing's for sure. Until then, the newest breed of V8s will march into the future, delivering ever more power and greater efficiency. You can count on that.